Hello. Hello, hello, hello. We are so excited to have our 22nd, yes, 22nd episode of Spiritual Shadowboxing. And as most people know, I am a boxer. I've been a martial artist. I have a black belt in karate. And so I love the idea of shadowboxing as yourself is the opponent in that shadow boxing. And when we do shadow work, which has been kind of the buzzword for years now, I love the idea of bringing this podcast so we can understand about our individual shadow work and our shadow work we can do as a collective together. And that's really what this kind of how this podcast started. So I just wanted to introduce myself. My name is Kelly Walsh. I'm a photographer. I'm a channel. My spiritual name is Amaliana. I have been working in the realm of trying to fulfill my full potential, which is something that we're going to talk about in this episode. My dear co-host is Freshta, and probably still saying the name wrong after all these years, but she still loves me, and she is one of the most delicious person I have ever met. I just want to give her, like, every time I just want to wrap my arms, my legs around her and just kind of hold her, because that is who she's about. She has one of the most generous hearts I've ever met in a person.
Great.
And then our guest today, I'm going to introduce Lisa V. Davis, and I've had the pleasure to have had on the podcast. I think is this the third or second time?
Third time, yeah.
Third time is a charm. And Lisa, I'm just going to say this to you now in front of everybody. I feel very connected to you. I don't know. I just feel like there's this synergy between us, tapping into everything you've done over your 40 plus years with the healing modalities. You and your husband co-created Natural Force Healing. And it's a unique and amazing system that I've had the pleasure to work with, where it works with, as they say, the physical ailments is the very tip of the iceberg, where it's emotional, mental, and spiritual. And they work with harmonics, with vibration, with energy. And it is just one of the most powerful healing experiences that I have. And she had co-founded it over 40 years. She's traveled the world for 14 years, studying all the greatest religions, and has brought her gifts to really inspire people to understand their full potential. So that's Lisa. And thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Look, this is very exciting for me to touch more people. Tomorrow is my 65th birthday. So yes, I've been doing what I'm doing 35 years, and as I had mentioned this is before they had a lot of health food stores. So. But one of the things that I'm trying to have people have an awareness of, I've been coaching now 15 years as a life coach, a spiritual life coach. I worked on the physical body and thousands of people over my career, and developing works for not only the physical, but the mental, emotional, and spiritual body. And my awareness was that, once somebody heals you, and once you read a book, and once you go to a seminar, you're kind of lifted for the day. Everybody's crying and having a good time, but then you go back to your old ways. We're molded a certain way. And so it had me really look at, why aren't we nurtured to understand this from the get-go, right?
Yeah.
So as I had mentioned in another class, where Freshta has brought up, was that we are living, which I realize that we're living below the midline at best of what our full capacity and full potential are.
Yes.
Yeah, you see the incredible athlete in the Olympics that surpasses everybody's thing, that no one could possibly have done 10 years ago, 20 years ago, whatever. Or someone that's done a genius thing, the Einstein, there are people that go outside the box. But the majority of us, even though we may be successful, have what we wanted to have in material things, we're still not there. Because as our belief system had come to understand through our teacher, who's long gone, Dr. M.L. Reese, was that the physical body is only 1%, right? It's the glove that goes over that hand. It's not the hand. So And the mind, emotion, body of that, there are three bodies: body, physical body, the body of mind, emotion, which is 9%. It's
Right.
the engine that tells you, okay, we're going to go this way.
So,
And
I want to dive deep into that, but I just want to introduce Diego for a second.
okay, I'm so
No,
sorry.
Yeah, no
No
worries.
worries. Like, we're like, go girl, go girl. Like, I want to hear all about it. But then
I
I'm
think
like,
we're all
hosting it,
excited.
like, I gotta get introduced.
Yeah, I think we're all excited. So it's all good because it's a wonderful.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, it's a wonderful springboard for introducing Diego, who Diego has been both a mentor when in his time as a relationship coach. I was following you for years. And then your passion became business coaching and how business is love. And that soul-led focus has been a huge support, an ally for me. And Diego, you've done work with thousands of people. You're supporting coaches in not just being good coaches, but launching their businesses so they can make an impact in the world. And yeah, just thank you for being here with us. Is there anything you want to say as we get started?
No, I think you pretty much wrapped it up. Thank you so much. I'm excited to jump into all the topics that we're already starting to, fruitfully be planted. So, but thank you all for having me.
Thank you so much. And like I said, we're so excited. And I just want to, before we get in, we did pull, it's been tradition for us to pull some cards every time we have a session. And generally we keep these private, and, among our guests and Prussia and I, but, Lisa's like, why don't you share? And I'm like, that's kind of a good idea. So since we're going to be talking about how to understand, to create the full potential of yourself, of your self-expression, I pulled three cards, and the first one was vulnerability. And it's a beautiful snake with some sacred geometry, it looks like quartz prisms that are moving up, like kind of like towers almost. And I really feel like, for us to participate and to move forward on our personal journeys of remembering, of healing, we have to be vulnerable. We have to start to ask those questions of ourselves, and to find the teachers, the healers, the mentors that will come into our lives to help us remember, because it really is now about remembering who we have always been, and to kind of like Lisa said, to move away that 1% that is physical and go deeper and deeper. So I love this card. And that once you approach your vulnerability, the next card was a journey to wholeness that we're all individually and collectively experiencing right now in this time, as we move into post-COVID, into a very kind of, as they say, divine feminine energies starting to move in, understanding that we can do, but we can be at the same time. And then the last one is transformation. Look at how beautiful, my little elf. So that's where these cards led us to. So I think it's a great way to kind of start the conversation. And I think we're really going to go with that question that Lisa was starting to get in about the quote that Feresh just said, that that most of us are living below the midline of our potential. So maybe Lisa, you can go a little bit more on that subject, and then Diego, maybe you can add in on how you see that in what you're doing on a personal and business level. So
First thing, I apologize, Diego, for doing that. I was at the gate, and they opened the gate, and I just so I honor what you're doing and apologize for my over enthusiasm. Anyway, what we were discussing is, to be able to tap into, and it's, I'm sure what you're doing, like people are working, making money and all this stuff, but they're unhappy. They're not there. They're living lives that don't necessarily make sense, that they're not passionate about, right? So how do we nurture? And you're right, love is it, to be able to nurture the love within, that I matter and my full possibility matters. And how do I do that? So again, after all the years of what I'm doing, I'm thinking, what is it that's missing here? And I have extraordinarily successful clients. It doesn't mean that they're happy, and they've gotten all the bells and whistles that they thought they wanted, and they got there, and they're not necessarily getting pleasure out of the thing that of existence, of being, of waking up in the morning. and being able to share that with everybody.
Yeah.
Diego?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, my own experience. I used to have a negative connotation with somebody telling me that I had a lot of potential. Because to me, it was like, well, yeah, but I mean, that means that I'm not really utilizing it. There's like, you're seeing all the things that are not yet done, you know? And so, but I'm starting to make like a closer connection with infinite potential. And so, I mean, my personal experience was one that was pretty recent, you know, and the one that I shared with Rishta. We can definitely dive into that when the moment's right. But yeah, I mean, I came to realize that it's love, right? And so I had navigated away from that, you know, when you start chasing dollars and, you know, superficial things, you know, and not that there's anything wrong with that, but, you know, I had forgotten love. You know, and then, and I think that's where, you know, my energy started to wane. I started feeling like I wasn't living at my potential, like there was something missing, you know, and then having had an experience that essentially brought that all rushing back to the center, you know, and thinking, oh my God, this is everything that I've been missing, like, you know, so yeah, it's definitely
Feeling that happens, right?
What was that?
I said it's a feeling that takes place. You know, you're doing maybe even the same thing, but you have this feeling connection to something that you can't put your hands on, you know? So that part of being, most of it is unseen in the world, majority of it. And to grow into our full possibility is a challenge because we can't see it. You know, we don't know what it looks like.
Exactly.
And
Or we've been told what it should be looked like that
exactly.
whole masculine a kind of approach of what success is. And you know, like the word potential, a lot of people will think, you know, potential is my, like you said, my financial potential, my potential to have that root chakra feeling safe and secure with the foundation of all the material things that money can buy. But as we know, and they say, the cliche is, money doesn't buy happiness. So when when you hear somebody says, you're not achieving a potential, he had that kind of negative response. But potential is just, I feel for myself, is that expansion of your heart. You know, I'm sorry, I have an accent. So that expansion of your heart, like, you know, that, so that when you wake up, when you're in your expressing your full potential, you can just wake up and just be content and happy with just the art of waking up. You know, just being in that space of knowing that as you put your feet down, get out of the bed, that you're fulfilling your potential. And it's very individual. I'm sure, like, you know, Lisa, with your clients, when they ask you about moving past their midline, I mean, what kind of examples or advice do you give?
Well, look, as you know, I live on our farm, 220-acre farm for many years. And I have to say that nature is, anything can be pretty much explained through nature.
Oh.
And I've said this before on your show, but we have this one tree on our property that's massive, this one oak tree, and each branch is the size of a tree.
Mm-hmm.
But I only have one tree like that on 220 acres. Why is that? You know, it drops millions of acorns. But see, instead of using potential, I like to use possibility.
Yeah.
So you have the probability and the possibility of what I can be. And in that, you start to see, oh, you know, what about me? There's a map in each and every one of us that is untapped of me, of where, here I am, I've been beat up in 65 years, I'll tell you that. Things happen to all of our lives that you would not have anticipated, wanted, or invited, right? And in that, you know, it does something to you. But even with the loss, even with the challenges, even with all of that, from here, you have a full possibility of what you can tap into. And I see it in nature. I've seen trees cut in half by a storm, and then all of a sudden they start to grow this thing on the side. How did that happen? Because it wants to still grow there. So this tree, which each limb is the size of a tree, had the right things that nurtured that tree. those other acorns are being eaten by the bears that walk by and the deer that walk by and the turkey and everything else, or it gets mowed. And it's rare. It's there, the one that went above the midline.
Exactly.
That was not cut, that didn't have disease, that wasn't so challenged that it destroyed it, right? And we're challenged every day. Every day, what's invited and appears in your life doesn't appear in my life. Some other challenge appears in my life to a lesser, more degree. And we have to then learn to be present with the lens of love, like you say. How am I gonna, you could do it a number of ways, 1,000 different ways, but how you approach that thing that comes in now will illuminate and give you that map to the full possibility of now.
I love this so much because I feel like I'm being forged in the fire of this right now as a new entrepreneur, and particularly a solopreneur. I noticed it this morning, right? It's like I woke up, I had all these things to do. I started doing them, and I noticed I have the sensitivity to the anxiety that's coming up when it becomes doing from scarcity. I think you all probably know what that's like. And I was like, fuck it, I'm gonna go take a walk. I'm gonna look at all the peonies that are in bloom. I'm gonna go hear the birds chirping, because if I sit here doing from this place, I don't think anything really energetically is gonna come of it. And I deserve better than that. So I took a walk before this podcast. I still have the endless list of things to do for my business. And yet now, like, my heart's bloomed and I have clarity and I feel relaxed. So I feel like I'm doing this sometimes every hour of the day, coming back to, wait a minute, it's not what I'm doing, but I'm going to say where I'm operating from when I'm doing it.
Well, it's that alignment. And initially, you get it, you think I got it, and then it goes away.
And
So
then coming back.
And what I teach is we're only as good as we are today. You know, I've been teaching my whole adult life, and I'm only as good as that moment when I'm on the phone with somebody or on doing something. There's nothing making me not make a mistake, not become angry, not become reactive or in anticipation of what's going to be, right?
Yeah. And here's the question I have for both of you, Diego. Maybe you can drop into this one first, is something you said, Lisa, and I wonder how this shows up for you each personally, and then obviously with those you serve and work with, is the fact that our potential actually isn't nurtured by this culture. So what's the sacred work that you've done personally, and then that you probably walk people through, Diego, that is about nurturing the possibilities and the probabilities that I think our societal programming is actually trying to counter?
Yeah, it's a great question. I've come to realize through, like, as with anything, through one of the most challenging moments of my life, when, I mean, suffering was literally like occupied the entirety of my brain. I think in those moments,
Oh, we lost him.
right, and I came to realize that for me, the frame of reference that really worked was saying, okay, there's programming, which is available everywhere, you know, and then there's empowerment, you know, and so I started to actually pull that apart and say who I am. I was born into power, you know, and so I had all these negative connotations with empowerment, self-empowerment. You know, I thought power was greedy, or it was corrupt, you know, or it was absolute, and I realized that I had just I had seen a particular segment perhaps and then made it out to be the whole. And so I was literally adopting frames that would continually put me in powerless positions. And so that coming back to, you know, moments of, let's say, scarcity, or moments where, you know, I didn't feel, I was feeling tired or, you know, anxious. And I realized how much of that had been programmed by, you know, by my phone, let's say, or by a person that is no longer in my life, you know, a teacher I once had, a TV show I once watched. And so for me, it was a journey back to self, to say, okay, like, no, this is who I am. And like all these other ways, you know, all these ways that I try to be, or that I've adopted powerless, you know, thoughts, feelings, you know, echoed in actions. That's not me. That's something that's been programming me. And that disassociation was like, it was beautiful, you know. And as with anything, you learn it, you forget it, and then you relearn it, and you're like, oh my God, you know, that's why I forgot it, to relearn it at a deeper level.
Yeah, you know, it's like we're talking about neuroplasticity of the brain, and those patterns that keep repeating themselves and repeating themselves, and also that expectation that you put on yourself and others from the narrative of the story you're telling yourself. So, like, you know, the work is in breaking those, as Dr. Joe Dispenza, I always have to quote him, is like breaking the patterns of behavior, and forging into a new future of who you are, unwritten, as you write it in the present moment, as you have said, Lisa. So thank you. And Lisa, do we lose Bond? Okay, we're good. All of a sudden I got really quiet.
No. I was just thinking about, you know, it's a beautiful thing, Diego, to see what you're doing as a young man. Again, I've taught many thousands of people in my career, and there were very few men in the room in general. And we need that to balance this and to get to where we want to go. And it has to be infused in the business as well. It can't just be in a spiritual community of a minority of people that are willing to do that on the fringe. For us to make change, it has to be in a way that we're willing to all walk this, no matter what walk we do, wherever we walk, no matter who a person is. And yeah, I deal with a lot of big business people. You would not know that, you know, and dependent on who they are, how more or less spiritual I am to be able to teach the same lesson, right? But the awareness is that the majority of it is untapped and beyond the seeing of our eyes and available. It's available. We live in a world of limitations that are built on other people's belief systems and that we come to own. And so in that, once you start to realize, hey, that may not be true, and you start to walk in a different place and start to swim a little, you're like, hey, you know, I'm not going to drown and I'm not crazy. You know, there was this doctor, I think his name was Emoto, and and he was into realizing that the power of love, just the word love, would change the frequency of things, of water.
Yes.
He did so he would write the word love and then freeze the ice cubes and there would be perfect cubes. He put the word hate on water that he froze and they couldn't make a perfect crystallization. So years later, I was in the Hamptons with a friend of mine. Every week we went to the farmer's market. And there was this guy, rusty guy, really cool, you know, and he has this great mushroom farm, you know, really good, the most beautiful mushrooms I've ever seen in my life. But it turns out, so because I have a farm, I thought, you know, maybe I'll get into mushrooms. This is years later, unconnected to this guy, right? So I get a mushroom book, which I happen to have right here. And I start then looking on YouTube and I see him, how he was growing those mushrooms.
Oh.
So in the blue oyster mushrooms are grown in bags, right? And he would write the word love on the bags. They put sterilized straw in there and they feed it with the spores. And those mushrooms that had love on the back grew bigger than the ones that didn't.
Wow. So
the frequency of love and the intention is magnified. So love is not just a word. It is a level and frequency in consciousness. And when we start to realize that anything, which I have seen and have been blessed to observe things that are unexplainable, that it comes out of a level of intense love and awareness that we don't know very much.
I love this. Like one of my favorite terms is fierce love, because I know that place in my heart. It's like a wildfire that wants my clients to flourish, wants my plants to flourish, wants everyone that I know or don't know to flourish, right? It comes from that, well, like it's life-giving. It's what brings life. And I'm reminded about the school experiment they did with these two beautiful plants inside these glass casings. And they were teaching about bullying. So it had a different, modality, but they asked the kids to speak really nice things to the one plant and then to speak really mean things to the other. And the one plant that essentially got bullied really did wilt away. It wilted away. And so they were pointing it out in this experiential way. And I started thinking, especially in the work I do with more shadow work and people rebuilding their own self-trust, is, gosh, what are we saying to ourselves?
Exactly. I was thinking the same thing. Like
And
how powerful that I am when you talk about yourself.
yeah, and Lisa, you've been talking about this very recently in your beautiful, beautiful lectures around what are the thoughts you're thinking? What are the words that are coming out of your mouth? Like, notice, because that, as simple as it sounds, is the biggest needle mover.
So
Yes.
true. So true.
Yeah.
It's like, I just want to kind of piggyback on what you said, and then I want Lisa or Diego to kind of speak more about this, about, the energetic signature of love and the frequency that it is. And, in the Bible, it says we co-create with our words, and the I am that I am is the frequency of creation. And when we speak and we use our words, I think most people, and I think this goes under the category of possibilities and potential, is the potential we have through our own vibrational expression of our words. And, love and these beautiful stories and people doing these experiments really kind of illustrate what we have the ability to do. And I think when it comes to love, I think one of the biggest things people need to heal is their own self-love. And maybe we can chat a little bit about that. Like, I think that, with the shadow work and with the healing, we all have to kind of nurture our own hearts, our own self-love, and I think, I think we all try that. We all have our ways. Diego, do you want to maybe comment on that?
I also want to add into this for both of you. We talk about love being the answer, but I'm also curious, why has love been so underestimated? That's a question for me.
Well, Diego, you go.
Sure. I mean, it's funny because we're talking about some of these studies that, essentially loving words were sent to a plant or to a body of water versus, maybe less loving words, said another way. And what I've come to realize is, like, I would always look at those studies as not being like scientifically grounded, and so I was always like dismissive of a lot of those, a lot of that stuff. And then, but then I give, of course, like, and to kind of like point to this from a scientific angle, is like, Johns Hopkins University, something that I've been talking about quite a lot recently. They've been doing psychedelic experiences using mushrooms and with heroic doses, and these patients have been able to overcome addiction at 90% levels, much higher than most therapies, if not all therapies. And they've actually like went back like literally like 10 years later, and things still record that experience as one of the most like insightful experiences of their life, and they continue to not be addicted to these things like heroin, etc. And you might think that, a lot of these addictions are like they're born from the ego and the need to like overcome this like self-loathing, and it's an escape. And most of these people, when they go through the experience, they point to love as the energy that has helped them move past that challenge. And so for me, it really is that love, and having had a very similar experience to that, like, I mean, for me, it's, for me, it's everything, you start to get to those places where it's like, it becomes very hard to describe, but it's a feeling and it's absolutely undeniable. And I think sometimes, like, the reason it might be underestimated is we get so trapped in the day-to-day, these earthly things, that we forget the universal energy of love. But it's always there. I think it's underneath everything, and so it's not so much that you need to learn something to love. I think it's you need to remove a lot of things, and it's always there, so that's been my experience at the very least.
Thank you. Beautiful.
Well, the understanding, you're right on. First thing, you have the most beautiful eyes.
I know, doesn't he?
You have the most beautiful, clear eyes. And that says something about you, by the way. But, the idea is there is no separation. And in humanity, we create separation between race, beliefs, cultures, tribes. This is what we love to do. You're different than me, but we are not. And so once you come to understand, you start to lift your head above the midline and you start to see there's no difference between me in consciousness. It's not separate from us. We're just kind of embedded in something, which is memory from another time. That's all it is. Memory from our own story, from our parents' stories, who made it who and where they came from our ancestors and how they got to where they were going. And so consciousness there's no separation in consciousness between love and that. It is our limiting belief systems that do that, you know? So we have to go back. And so the reason those psychedelic works are because the mind does not know the difference between thought and reality. Doesn't know the difference. So the psychedelic takes you to another place that starts to believe that that's true, right? And you start to forget the other thing. So when you wake up in a nightmare, which everybody's had at some point, and you're sweating, and your heart's beating, and you're crying because the boogeyman's after you, you think it's real. And your mind thinks it's real. So every day we have a little boogeyman after us every day, that our heart is beating and we're stressed and we act and reactive or projecting based on this thing that's living actively in our brain. And there's only one way to get rid of that, is by observation, diminishing it, and refocusing on something else, which you're doing with people. You're helping them to refocus. That's the disconnect. You know, so when they do those psychedelics, it's reprogramming a belief system or erasing one so that it fills the mind with another thing. That's like, oh, that wasn't so bad. It's a belief system. We're just filled with belief systems. And that thing, that terrorist or boogeyman will tell you anything and support any belief system known to mankind. And it lies all day long.
And I want to add, it's reaffirmed by our society, right? So it's like you got a little bug in the system, but then it's constantly, I'm going to say constantly being reaffirmed, the not enoughness or the limiting beliefs. And so it feels to me like a little seed that's cracked open underground that has to push against the gravity and the weight of soil beyond its physical body, but not beyond its will.
Yeah,
That's great. I
it
love
has
that.
to be nurtured. It has to be given the space to grow, you know, but you don't put it in the light, it won't grow. It will just stay there, the seed. The other thing is there's work that has to go on before you plant the seed. So if you go out, I'm a farmer. So you go out and you just cast seed out there in a field or on top of something, most likely most of it will not grow. You have to turn the soil over. You got to dig into that spade and you flip it over, and it's bloody, awful work that you're thinking, what am I doing this for when I can go to the grocery store and buy some tomatoes, right? So the thing is that you do that and you turn it over, and then there are roots, and then there are rocks, and there's all this other kind of stuff in there, you know? I found a spoon not that long ago. Must have been 100 years old. But anyway, so you do that, then you get this thing, this soil that's like giving thing. Then you put the seed in.
Yeah.
But you got to do work, interior work, not exterior. People do, but then you have to do this thing where, you wake up in the morning, you're grateful that you woke up. And see, people always think, especially because I live where the winter's quite long here in New York State. But, everybody's like, I can't wait till spring. I can't wait till spring. Then it's spring, they can't wait till summer. Then they can't wait till the fall because it's so spectacular. So they just can't be present with the possibility, whether it's raining, snowing, icy, cold. You got to love it all, and what appears in your life, who appears in your life in that moment is meant for you to have an awareness about. And that's the trick when you're trying to teach somebody. And they say, well, I got lost. I lost all my money. I lost all my family. I lost somebody through the pandemic. I lost my hope, my dreams, my everything. And every one of us suffer this thing. Yeah. Every one of us, but we feel alone during it. So to be able to take that thing that makes us feel isolated, to realize that all humanity suffers this. Yeah. So it makes us the same.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much. I actually have a question specifically for Diego. And just my question is, what is it like? Actually, you seem like a youngish, handsome male. And as Lisa said, we've all been doing this work for many, many years. And most of the work that really be that digging into the dirt. And I love all those roots and nature references, because in my meditation, I love to go into the root chakra and really dig into the Mother Earth. But for Emil, what is it like to start to discard all this old kind of the old paradigm of how relationships should look or how businesses should look, and how you, with your experience with bringing that love quota into what you do, how do you feel like it is for you, and how do you start to discard the old and kind of embrace the new from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's an overstimulation, I guess, in societal programming for a male to be a particular way, and for a female to be a particular way, but I think when you get to the root of expression, you realize, one thing that's very, very like front and center for me is that we both have both masculine and female energies, masculine and feminine energies, I should say. And so from that perspective, it's, nurturing love is absolutely essential, as is tough love, and so for me, it's implementing both, knowing that what might be right for one person might be very different for another, and the same for me. There's a moment when I'm going to need nurturing love, and, a person to kind of say, hey, like, it's okay. And another time for a person to say, get off your ass. And both of those, if they're coming from a loving space, it can be felt, and I think that's kind of like where I've had to journey to, because I think for me especially, it was, kind of like the diminishment of like that the feminine love, like energy, the nurturing love, yet knowing that was very much a part of me, and so when you do that, I mean, you feel everything I think that you do comes from a place of like trying to prove. And I don't think that's, I mean, you can operate in that energy, try that energy if you want, but I can say that from my own perspective, like when I was trying to prove things, far below my potential, and so for me, one of the things that I experienced recently in this psychedelic experience was actually like that I've been carrying with me a lot of sadness, like a lot of sadness. And it was actually crying and shedding all this sadness. And it was through that experience itself that, I started imagining how those tears are very similar to the rain that gives fruit, gives life to that seed as well, to eventually, sprout itself. And so that then gave birth to vulnerability, the same way a seed itself has a vulnerable stage before it really like roots itself down, because at that point, it's no longer contained within the shell, and now it's vulnerable. And for it to transform into that tree, and the strength of a tree, we need to protect that vulnerability in however it chooses to manifest itself, whether it be in a female, whether it be in a male, or however you choose to identify yourself. But ultimately, it's like that vulnerability, I believe, needs to be protected. And so now I'm more inclined to share about love, let's say, because it's always been associated with the feminine more so, and then and I'm starting to just express myself in ways that previously I would have more fear around. And oddly, like all the stuff that I was like, well, no, that's too feminine, that's not masculine enough, is by actually like releasing that, like letting go of it, and actually stepping into my confidence of being whatever I want to be in that moment, like sharing however I choose to share. I haven't seen a negative repercussion from that.
Yeah, and I will add, in fact, because I've watched you grow through this, and as you've also held and supported me, that your content, when it was like that, all proving, trying to prove, like one-sided, right, polarized, masculine, was very different than the what you've been sharing recently, where you've been sad or vulnerable or needing to take space to care for yourself, and being like, that is far more compelling to me from one human to another than sort of the peacocking bravado that can feel to me polarized, right? Like if there's two river banks, like being able to stand in the middle of the stream instead of like being on one riverbank or the other. And I can speak to what you do when I'm having a total meltdown, which I've had a few in the last year, that you validate, you show compassion, you show care. And once I've gotten through that, like being seen and heard place, and you're like, now what are you going to do? Right. So you really, you nurture and then you activate. And I do think that's a great quality in a coach.
That's awesome. I'm glad you experienced it that way. I come to realize it's very much like, when a baby's learning to walk, you're not going to get like, get up, right? I mean, when the baby falls, you nurture that baby. But if all you do is nurture that baby will never walk.
Mm-hmm.
And so you do need to give it its opportunity to stand up, and encourage it forth in a different way. So, and we all have that. I think of that as business as well. Our business goes through vulnerable stages, and it needs to pick up and learn how to walk in ways. And so, yeah, everything for me is love. Everything for me is love. I forget it, I reminded, and I go, oh my God, yeah, that was the lesson I needed to learn.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, and I have one more question. We have a little bit more time left, and then I will gently close us out. Lisa, if you wouldn't mind sharing, and I think this will resonate with all of us, when you talk about us being born as this light, and then some of those lampshades, right?
Oh, yeah.
I feel like
I
that's
love
such a
that.
potent, I could hear that over and over again, because I think we need to.
The thing is that, just to end up, on what he was mentioning, which is so powerful, Diego, is that, we can either come from this voice, inner voice, which is not real, right? Or there's, when you start to go above and you raise your eyes above the water a little bit, it's a feeling. It's just a feeling. And do I trust this feeling? Because it may not have any proof at all of why I should. Do I know to move toward it in a way without any answer, without any realization of why I should, but I know, I feel it, like fishing, feel it on the end of the hook. And that's where we're going, right? The other part of trying to figure it out and answer and dice it tends to diminish its power. But there was a thing that I had taught you before on this class, that one of the things in my observations that on a spiritual level, what are we before we enter here? Is light. We're part of a proton of light, but a very specific light, a very specific seed. So yours, Freshta, whether you were born into Greece or another country or Africa, you would have had your personality of who you are, right? Mm-hmm. Your tendency, your veracity, all that, your humor would have been you. So that little light's born into the womb of a mother, right? And in that womb, as soon as that bright light enters, a little lampshade goes over that light. And that's the emotions of that mother. There's no judgment about it. It's what it is, right? So then the baby's born into the world and it's crying. And as soon as it enters there, another lampshade goes on with the culture, the smells, their language, their beliefs, how they, the temperature of the environment, all is imprinted on that baby as a lampshade. So as life goes on, more and more lampshades go on with the belief systems, the cultures, the separation, the judgments, the prejudice, the likes and dislikes that are not the lights. They're the lampshades that are being put upon the light from the memory of the other people that were raising you and your own personal experiences, and then the people that raised them as well. So as some people go on and on and on in life, there's so many lampshades over that light that no light emits at all. Our source just being uncomfortable, just discomfort, like I'm doing all this, I have all this, but don't feel right. Don't know why, because you're not experiencing the very essence of what you are. So then, so many lampshades on some people, no light emits, I call that the terrorist. Because a terrorist convinced any human being to do anything at any time and support a belief system to do that. And we're very aware of what that's happened this week.
Yeah.
That something could convince a human being to do something heinous. That's not who they are. No. They too are the light. But there's so many lampshades that go on that don't allow that to be seen. So a spiritual person or a person working in the zone starts to realize, I need, we all start to try to fix another person, but you realize, I need to take my lampshades off to start to reveal this thing that has been calling me, and I didn't know what it was, right? So you start to remove that, and all of a sudden it starts to be more clear, and then something appears as you start to be present. So we have to be more still. We have to be more quiet, because it doesn't speak at all. It's a feeling. It's an awareness. It's something that shows up like that. And I can tell you 1,000 stories that are unbelievable stories on that zone. Not every day, maybe years ago, but you don't forget it then. So it appear into you only, so that you can say, oh, that was in that moment that I was present.
Oh gosh, thank you. I'm so impacted by that every time, because
I know, me too.
my whole body says, yes, that's true, right? That so much of the work, and I think, 3 of us here are coaches, is helping people notice the lampshades and helping them have the tools. I'm not ever taking a lampshade off of someone, but I'm like, I can give you tools so you can find
This is the illusion. Please take my pain away. Please make it go away. Please do something to make this better. And you can't really do that, because they'll have to go around it at some other point and learn it in a conscious way. So I learned that a long time ago. Yeah. So the person has to actually pick up the tools and say, okay, I'm going to try to do this on my own with the little thing that I have. But I realized no matter how little it might be, it's exactly what you need at that time to make it happen. Period.
To have the next step forward. And I learned that early in my coaching studies, where my mentor said, you can't feed people their epiphanies. They've got to be challenged and find them themselves. That's the only way it's going to stick, right, for them. And Diego, I'm curious for you, as we slowly wrap up, how do you find that what we're talking about is how you support your clients? Because I know as firsthand that you do this in your own kind of alchemy.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's, the experience of each individual, how they receive it. I choose to give from this space of love. I've come to realize afterward that, you can give immense value, but receiving value is very different, and so the best of my ability is just showing up and being present and doing whatever work I can to continue to, step in further and further to that light and that love, and to remove my own lampshades. And I think that's the journey that I'm on, and if I can share some insights that I've had, and perhaps another person goes and they integrate that, they receive that, they take off their own lampshade. That's awesome. But ultimately, we're all on our each journey, shining our lights. So yeah.
Thank you.
Both
Thank you both. I have to say, I love the whole lampshade thing, because it's so perfect. So, because people can really understand and see and relate to what you're saying as a way of diminishing their own light and how that's happening. And I've heard that expressions or that teaching said differently many times, but Lisa, what I think is so powerful about that, it really will hit home with so many people, people that are just starting to understand and ask that question and wanting to be vulnerable and to strip away, because it's scary to strip away those lampshades. That's what that sense of identity has been for a long time.
Right. So that's what karma is. Karma is memory from where we've been. That's all it is. Exactly. So does that mean I have to repeat the same mistakes as my forefather, right? My ancestors or my culture? So we have this incredible ability to change it now from wherever we are, no matter where we are. So I just want to leave you with that it's just now that we can change it.
Yeah.
Perfect.
I love this. Yeah, thank you.
And rewrite it. Yeah.
Thank you both for that the power is really in where we stand now and where we move towards. That's a big takeaway for me working with both of you. And I know, Lisa, you've got a lecture coming up next Sunday, so we'll put the link in to the YouTube, and then Diego, I'll put your info in as well for the things you have coming up. Thank you both for just showering us with this, I call it a juicy conversation, but there's alchemy here. And hopefully for our audience, thank you for watching. We hope that we've helped serve and bring you a little bit of inspiration on your Friday. And if you all will hang out once we end the recording, we'd love to just thank you offline as well.
Thank you
Thank
guys.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.